Good evening. Thank you for being here tonight, and I think that I'm equally thankful to Elissa to say yes. So I thought this program should take place in Brooklyn. I'm biased, I live in Brooklyn, okay? But it should take place in a suited place, and I think the Brooklyn Museum is the right place for this time to stand together with these writers who have faced great danger. And so to reach out to the Brooklyn Museum and to get a resounding yes, please come, let's collaborate, was fantastic. So, as Elissa said, I'm Clarice. I'm the Deputy Director of Public Programs for Pan American Center. And tonight's reading is for a multi-talented artist, a poet, an artist, a curator, Ashraf Fayadh. I wanted to point out before I talk about Penn that the images that you saw while we were waiting for the program to start are photographs that were taken by Ashraf and posted on his Instagram account. And I think it gives us a window in terms of into his sensibility, maybe as an artist, as a photographer. And I thought that was important to kind of paint a whole picture of who we are celebrating tonight. A couple of months ago, the International Literature Festival Berlin called on all individuals and institutions that care about justice and freedom to participate in a worldwide reading. So as we stand here tonight, there are more than 120 readings in 43 countries, drawing attention to the ongoing risk of execution faced by Ashraf Fayadh. He is not the only one, unfortunately, facing such dire threats, as proves the recent troubling news about the killings of 47 Saudi prisoners and yesterday's arrest and release of human rights lawyer Omar Badawi. I will let my colleague Karen tell you more about Ashraf's case and similar cases. And so quickly, I wanted to, for those of you who do not know Pan American Center, I wanted to let you know about who we are. We are the largest branch of the world's leading international literary and human rights organization. PEN is also a membership organization of over 4,300 writers, editors, translators, and publishers. If you're already a member, thank you for your support. If you're interested in our work, please talk to me, talk to my colleagues here tonight, and we'll tell you more about how you can help support our work and get engaged. We offer a wide range of programs, such as public programs, the Literary Awards Program, the Prison Writing Program, the World Voices Festival of International Literature that happens every spring in New York City, and many advocacy and anti-censorship campaigns. So tonight, we celebrate and take a stand for free expression, creative freedom, and human rights. And we're so happy that you came out and are standing with us. The format of the event is simple. We'll hear a little bit more about Ashraf Fayadh's case, and our co-host will introduce our wonderful cast of readers, and this will be followed by the readings. At the end of the program, don't forget to stick around and see the exhibition upstairs, Agit Prop. Also, take a moment to tell your friends and tweet about this event to keep the case alive. Use Free Ashraf as a hashtag. So I want to thank quickly our readers, Natalie Diaz, Duranya Freeman, Dred Scott, Lawrence Joseph, Dina, Omar, Danniel, Schoonebeek, and Freeman. They all also said yes when we reached out to them, and they were all so honored to be able to participate tonight, and I'm thankful to them. We have our co-hosts tonight for the evening, Elisa Chappell and Rob Spillman. Elissa is a short story writer, editor, and essayist. She's the co-founder of a literary magazine, Tin House, and editor-at-large. She's also a contributing editor at Vanity Fair. And Rob Spillman is editor of Tin House magazine and editorial advisor of Tin House Books. He's a contributor of book reviews and essays to Salon and Book Forum. So now we'll get started. Please welcome my colleague, Karen Kolekar, Director of Free Expression. Thank you very much for coming again.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for being with us tonight. I'm so honored to be here tonight to help set the stage for this evening of readings in solidarity with Ashraf Fayadh, a poet, artist, and curator of Palestinian origin, who, as you've heard, is currently facing a death sentence in Saudi Arabia. As the director of PEN America's Free Expression Program, I wanted to set the stage a bit by discussing current restrictions on expression in Saudi Arabia, talking about Ashraf's case, and highlighting the types of work PEN does to help writers at risk. PEN regularly engages in advocacy on cases like Ashraf's. Publicly, we issue press statements, disseminate information via social media channels, organize joint sign-on letters to pressure governments or other powerful actors, or meet with officials to express our concerns. Privately, we assist individuals who are facing the risk of imprisonment or attack as a result of their creative expression, both in the US, around the world, offering practical assistance when we can, or even simply connections to others who can help them and their families. PEN's case list at the moment is comprised of more than 900 writers worldwide, so we're kept very busy. We became involved in Fayadh's case in mid-November, shortly after we learned of his death sentence, when we joined with PEN centers and writers worldwide to send joint letters to the Saudi government to protest this harsh sentence. PEN also enlisted prominent American writers to send a joint letter to President Obama, asking the US government to speak out about his case with their Saudi counterparts. And as you've heard, following an appeal by the International Literature Festival in Berlin, we have joined the call to hold this series of worldwide readings to join attention to his case and to highlight the solidarity felt by writers around the world for Ashraf. Fayadh's case originally began in 2013, and after a series of arrests, detentions, charges, and drawn-out judicial proceedings, he was sentenced to death by beheading for apostasy in November 2015, in part because of supposedly blasphemous themes contained in a 2008 poetry collection called Instructions Within. He appealed the sentence in mid-December, and the petition is currently being considered by the Saudi courts, so we could be hearing any day about the final verdict. Unfortunately, Ashraf's case is not unique. Conditions for free speech are particularly restrictive in Saudi Arabia, and authorities have tightened their control over expression in the past few years by clamping down on dissent and nonconformist religious beliefs in the country. In February 2013, a sweeping anti-terrorism law took effect that allowed the authorities to press for terrorism charges for anyone who demanded political reform, exposed corruption and unjust practices, or simply exercised the right to freedom of expression. A new law in April 2014 decreed atheism to be a crime punishable by up to 20 years in prison. Apostasy remains on the books as an offense punishable by death, and that's the sentence that Ashraf has been given. Print and broadcast media content is tightly controlled by the authorities and royal family, and digital media, for example, internet websites and blogs, are also heavily regulated, with more than 400,000 websites blocked if they have content that the authorities deem to be either immoral or politically sensitive. According to the Committee to Protect Journalists, as of the end of 2015, there were 7 writers in prison in Saudi Arabia, most on anti-state charges. In addition to hearing Ashraf's work tonight, we'll also be hearing the works of several other poets and writers facing lengthy jail sentences or serving prison terms in the region, including Raif Badawi, a Saudi blogger, activist, and creator of the website Free Saudi Liberals, sentenced to 10 years in prison, 1,000 lashes, and a fine, in addition to a 10-year travel ban after his sentence expires. Luckily, he has only received 50 lashes out of that 1,000-lash sentence. Muhammad al-Ajami, a Qatari poet, serving 15 years in prison after a secret trial in 2012 on charges of criticizing the emir in a poem. And Fatima Ektasari, an Iranian poet, sentenced in October 2015 to 11 and a half years in prison and 99 lashes for her poetry, which was interpreted as insulting the sacred, and even for shaking hands with male writers at international literary events. PEN has been involved in advocacy on behalf of these individuals, and we hope that this reading will help shine the spotlight on their cases as well as to showcase their literary work. Please visit our website at www.pen.org, follow us on Facebook and Twitter, sign up for our weekly newsletter to stay informed, or even donate to our emergency funds that help writers like Ashraf who are facing very severe threats. Thank you very much, and now I'd like to introduce our literary co-hosts for the evening, Rob Spillman and Elisa Chappell. Thank you.
Good evening. It is so nice to see so many of you here this evening. Robbie and I both feel extremely honored to be a part of this evening's event. As writers and literary citizens of a country that counts Saudi Arabia as a friend and longtime ally, we have the power and the obligation to call upon our government to use their considerable influence to stop the execution of Ashraf Fayadh. Ashraf, artist, curator, and poet, for years has been considered the unofficial ambassador for Saudi Arabia's burgeoning contemporary art world. Instrumental in introducing Saudi artists to Western audiences I'm a little upset too, and look at this. I'm a little verklempt. He has been instrumental in introducing Saudi artists to Western audiences. There's a sick irony in Fayadh, a poet who seeks to map the very essence of the human experience and the shared territories being persecuted in this way, and being a victim of his country's most barbaric practices. And we, as citizens and artists, cannot look away. Living in the United States, it's very easy for us to tell ourselves that we don't have to do anything to get involved, because we reason we live in a modern, civilized world, and writers and artists and public figures are not jailed or beheaded for expressing their opinion. This is what we tell ourselves, perhaps so that we can sleep at night, perhaps so that some of us can make art and write about it. I don't know about you, but today when I was thinking about coming here, I was thinking about how I feel that an artist has a moral obligation to write about the truth and to write about their personal experiences in the most honest way possible. And I couldn't imagine what it was like for Ashraf right now, not only to be in prison counting days, but also what it must be like to be deprived of that ability to process your emotions and write down what you're feeling most passionately. That's a terrifying place to be in. So I want to say tonight that, speaking for Robbie and myself, it's an honor to be a part of this evening, and in doing so to accept the responsibility and take up the mantle to protect freedom of speech all over the country, and particularly tonight for Fayadh. Thank you.
Thank you, Elisa. So it is my pleasure to give brief introductions to the readers tonight, and I'm going to introduce all of them in a row so that Ashraf's work can be heard and other writers' work can be heard so uninterrupted. So I'm going to introduce in order. So first up is Natalie Diaz, who is a member of the Mojave and Pima Indian tribes, who is a poet, language activist, and educator. She will be followed by Duranya Freeman, who has worked as a journalist for Sri Lanka's The Nation and is a staff writer for 2 of Colorado College's student publications, where she is a freshman. She will be followed by Dred Scott, who is a photographer, performance artist, and provocateur who makes revolutionary art to propel history forward and is part of the amazing agitprop exhibition here, which is open after this. He will be followed by Lawrence Joseph, who is the grandson of Lebanese and Syrian Catholic immigrants and is a poet and professor of law who holds both a BA and JD from the University of Michigan and a second BA and MA from Cambridge University, making us all feel like slackers. He will be followed by Dina Omar, who is a writer and graduate student in medical anthropology at Yale University. She's a founding member of the National Students for Justice in Palestine and served as the National Executive Board for the Palestinian Youth Movement. She will be followed by Danniel Schoonebeek, who is an American poet, and his first book of poems, American Barricade, was published by Yes Yes Books in 2014. And lastly is Rue Freeman, who is a Sri Lankan-born writer and activist. She is the author of the novels A Disobedient Girl and Ansalmaline, as well as the amazing anthology, and the editor of the amazing anthology, Extraordinary Rendition, American Writers on Palestine, which came out this year from OR Books. So please welcome our first reader, Natalie Diaz. Thank you.
Iwan Jahotan, Evak Idum, Hakula Imanj, Amich Tanam, Natalie Imulk. Tonight we will all return to our homes. I will walk down a street lined with lights, take from my pocket a key that fits a door I will open, onto a room with a table of fruit and wine, a desk to build my altar of books, a basin, soap, clean water to wash my face, and in a mirror above those, my face will be reflected back to me, and I will know, life, you have not left me. I am still here. Later, my lover will draw the blinds and lift my shirt, undress me, will hold my sad head in her hands, and tell me a story of what this body is for, to live, to pray only desire and joy, to call one another by name. What is more tender than to be called by a lover? I do not know what it is to die for something. In poetry, a man, a woman should live. To Ashraf, I say, Kememeram, Kithper Tahanam, Chukwar Mermeram. I'm reading a poem translated by Fadi Judah, Ashraf's Frida Kahlo's mustache. I will ignore the smell of clay, the reproach of rain, and the choke that has long settled in my chest. And I will search for an appropriate condolence of my situation that doesn't permit me to explain your lips in the manner I'd hoped for, or to shake dewdrops off your reddish petals, or to lessen the intensity of the obsession that overwhelms me when I realize you're not next to me now and won't be. I'm forced to justify my position to the silence that night punishes me with. Pretend that the earth is silent, just as we see it from afar, and that all what happened between us was no more than a poor prank that shouldn't have gone this far. What's your idea about the days I usually spend with you, about my words that used to rapidly evaporate, about my heavy pain, and the knots that had sedimented inside my thorax like dried up algae? I forgot to tell you that in the practical sense of the word, I've grown used to your absence, and that my wishes have lost their way to your desires, and my memory has begun to corrode, and that I still chase light, not because I want to see. The dark always frightens, even when we are used to it. Is my apology for everything that happened while I was trying to make up excuses enough for you? Is it enough for the times jealousy raged in some place inside me, or when disappointment ruined yet another of my dark days? And for my repetition that justice will always suffer the disturbances of menstruation, and that love is a backward, impotent man at the end of his days? I will be forced to trick my memory and pretend that I have no problem sleeping, and rip all the remaining questions, the questions that now search for persuasive answers after all punctuation has been dropped for purely personal reasons. Let the mirror explain to you how beautiful you are. Remove my pile of dust, my words breathe deeply. Remember how much I loved you and how the whole thing turned into a brief electrocution that almost caused a great fire and an empty warehouse. The sun is extremely polite when it comes to covering her mouth while yawning. The sun doesn't know how to impose its total control over the earth. The same fate the sun has with darkness. The sun has no choice but to resist the dark, even if Pluto has lost its qualifications to remain among the vertiginous planets. The moon has a different take on imposing its will over the sea, and the sea can swallow whatever creatures it desires and lay claim to more land on account of global warming, the punctured ozone, a woman's right to wear a bikini, and the temptation of birds with the riches of fish. I will no longer be pain pills for your monthly period and won't enjoy your exceptional conversation while you prepare for a long nap or when you want to offload your anger or while you spend some lovely time in a bar packed with lovers of jazz. I won't be able to sleep enough or explain Nietzsche's mustache or persuade you that Imad's work is a unique experiment in art. I will busy myself with normalizing relations between earth and water in order to obstruct fire on its way to becoming an ambassador of goodwill. Only then will the air cease to appear presentable as it dries out your underwear on the laundry line. I walk in the street of the inexpressible and question the indifferent raindrops. I try to remove the rust that's stuck in my throat. How many times should I refer to the wind's guidebook to decipher your moods? How many words have I silenced to spare you the smell of disappointment that my American cigarette blows? I won't be the piggy bank you break whenever you run out of funds, and I won't include as poetic chore an amorous description of your eyes, because your eyes, in the final analysis, are more fatal than those that ruin Jarir's mind, or more poetic than Sayab's palm tree groves. Your eyes are precisely the way angels prostrated to Adam, and I exclude Satan, naturally, for rhetorical reasons. The world this morning resembles my stomach with its ulcers, resembles the ache that it spends its weekends in my head, resembles the heaps of broken glass that fill my memory. The world is no longer all right since I've stopped worrying about glass, or the reply letter to my letter, or Mrs. Clinton's failure to lead the Democratic Party. Don't look for me. I will be there with every sip of coffee. And when you relax at a spa or want to laugh or cry, or if you desire to toss yourself into someone's arms, or when you can't resist your insomnia or your mobile phone that didn't ring during your sleep, or when in the unconsciousness of writing, or when you want to talk or while watching a movie regardless of its quality, and when you tickle the ground as you walk, exercise, and when you hear our song, the one we have yet to agree on.
Good evening. So standing up here as a college sophomore, it's difficult not to feel very overwhelmed by all the other writers here, who obviously have a lot more experience than I do. But my piece in my mother's anthology, I wrote about speaking out and the importance of that, no matter how young you are, which is why I'm so grateful to be a part of this important event today. I'm honored to be reading the poem Run by Iranian poet Fatemeh Ekhtasari, who has recently received a very harsh prison sentence for his own artistic expression a few short months ago. And like Fayadh's case, PEN has been following this case and circulating a petition calling for the nullification of his sentence. Run, a voice passed by me, and someone just ran inside my confused mind. Run. The streets were crowded and crowded. Run. The cars were honking in an endless night, honking after many years of forgetfulness, entering my ear and confusing my mind. I heard them honking, and I kept a torn-up picture in my hands. I heard the sound of being lost in all the dead-end streets. I heard the sound of tears slipping down the rocked eyes. I heard the sound of tear gas and cigarettes all stinging. I heard the sound of batons meeting backs and heads. And I heard the shadows running behind me, run. Two silences made a voice, the voice of our hands, separated from each other, the voice of yours, passing by me, the voice of yours, becoming the voice of the people, and the voice of mine, lost in all those bad days. I was sticking to a postern, sticking to my office, to my job, sticking to my pills and all those nights of insomnia, and sticking to all those duplicated mornings. I used to wake up and practice my laughs and practice my cries with a duplicated mirror. I used to put my impatient signature in the bottom of official papers. I used to look for one thing in all the newspapers impatiently. And I used to come back from the office in all the afternoons of impatience, coming back to the silence that welcomes you in every room, coming back to the cold hands that keep up the hot cup of tea, coming back to the bad days followed by worse, and coming back to me, waiting to welcome my husband, like a happy wife who waits to welcome her husband, waiting for him to throw his socks in the living room. Run. My house is filled with the thrown away sounds. Run. Someone touched my shoulder. You should run to the streets of madding crowd and to a woman in Arabian veil. You should run to those two shadows behind you and to the fear of keeping a green wristband in your hand. You should run to yourself stung by a hot bullet and to your fingers of the V sign. You should run to the clotting blood in the corner of our lips and to the night which is our sad resumption, to the incomplete night of liberty, and to yourself dying in my arms, to yourself being alive among the deads, and to our hands meeting each other again. Call me, I am you. I am as cold as your hands. Call me. I want to come back to the streets. Call me, to whisper in your ears with love. Call me, to lose myself in your arms and in my dreams. Come back and resurrect the memories. Call me and rescue me from myself. Thank you.
Good evening. It's standing here and seeing so many people out here is it's wonderful that we're here, and it's horrible that we have to be here. I do want to say that it is who wants to live in a world where people are sentenced to death supposedly because they don't believe in a God or the right God, and who wants to live in a country that supports regimes like Egypt or Israel or Saudi Arabia that militarily and politically backs regimes where they sentence people to death for not believing in the right God. We need revolution. So, I will be reading a poem by Raif Badawi. The poem is entitled 1,000 Lashes Because I Say What I Think. And preceding this, it's not a poem, it's an essay. And preceding this, the translator of it said, in 2012, Saudi blogger Raif Badawi was arrested for insulting Islam through electronic channels. In his blog post, Badawi had called for the separation of church and state, advocated for the equality of all religions, and condemned religious extremism. As a consequence, he was sentenced to 10 years in prison and 1,000 lashes. His controversial blog post, introduced by this essay, have been published by Greystone Books. Proceeds from 1,000 Lashes Because I Say What I Think will go to Badawi's family and their efforts to procure his release. I was engrossed in my attempts to re-examine liberalism in Saudi Arabia, which I was contributing to the prevalence of the Enlightenment in my community. I wanted to break the walls of ignorance, to shatter the sacredness of religious clerics. I wanted to advocate for change and respect for freedom of speech, to call for women and minorities' rights and the rights of the indigent in Saudi Arabia. That was before I was jailed in 2012. Imagine living your daily life, enacting all of its details, in a small 215 square foot room, accompanied by more than 30 people accused of a variety of criminal activities. In prison, I socialized with people confined for criminal offenses, killers, thieves, drug lords, and pedophiles. My interactions with them altered many of my faulty understandings in regard to this world of criminals. Before my imprisonment, like any other person, I would go to bed after I checked all the windows and doors in my home for fear of criminals. Now I lived amongst them. I slept, ate, showered, changed my clothes, celebrated and cried, got angry, laughed out loud, and screamed my lungs out, all while surrounded by their leering eyes. After colossal efforts and countless attempts to acclimate myself to them, I focused on changing my way of seeing them. I pulled the curtain from the other side and started to explore the depths of their world. It took me a while, but I came to the conclusion that criminals laugh too. Yes, they fall in love, feel pain, and are capable of deep, soft human emotions. It is agonizing for me to compare those genuine feelings I witnessed with the negative perceptions of people I considered close to me in the past. In the prison lavatory, I took a look around me only to find some filthy tissues and excrement everywhere. It was a staggering situation. The walls were soiled, the doors were rusty and rotten. Here I was, trying to adapt to this new chaos. My eyes scanned the walls around me. Reading the hundreds of sentences written on the sticky walls, my eyes caught an unexpected sentence. Secularism is the solution. I rubbed my eyes with both palms. For a second, I didn't believe what I was seeing. I wanted to be sure that I was indeed reading with my eyes were locked upon. I escaped my reality for a second. I felt like I was standing in the middle of a dirty old nightclub in a poor neighborhood. By the wee hours of the night, a beautiful, mesmerizing woman walks in. She fills the nightclub with a stunning joy and life energy. I hardly knew what made me think of that, why I was pulled into this fantasy. It seems that the change of toilet seat played a major role in the way I made sense of this new, strange life I was living. I smiled. I wondered who the person might be who wrote such a sentence. In a prison filled to the walls with thousands of prisoners, all jailed because of criminal activities. My astonishment was equal only to my happiness at reading such a short, beautiful, and different sentence. The sentence stood alone among dozens of obscenities that were written in so many different Arabic dialects. This discovery could only mean one thing. There was at least one other person here who understood me, who understood the reason I was jailed and the goals I was hoping to accomplish. In the following days, I started to see a whole different reality that turned this world of criminals into my own personal paradise. I built the heaven according to my own standards. I detailed it according to a new set of beliefs that departed from all my previous life experiences before my imprisonment. Yes, lavatory cell number 5 really touched me. When my dear wife, Insaf, told me a large publishing house in Germany was interested in collecting my articles in a book translated into German, I hesitated. I will be completely honest with you. When I wrote my first article, I couldn't imagine it would be gathered in a book of Arabic, let alone translated into a different language. Well, if you picked up this book, managed to read this far, and you're still going, I can safely assume that you, my dear reader, are interested in reading what I have to say. Some think that I have something to say. Others think that I am an ordinary man with nothing to share, a man who doesn't deserve his writings to be collected in books or translated for the world to share. However, when I look within, I only see that thin man who miraculously withstood 50 lashes while a group of people celebrated his pain, repeatedly chanting Allahu Akbar. All for the articles you are about to read. Yes, I was accused of apostasy, the conscious abandonment of Islam, and sentenced to death. The sentence was then reduced to 10 years of imprisonment, as well as 1,000 lashes. I was also required to pay 1 million Saudi riyals in financial punishment. I spent 3 years writing these articles for you. I was tortured. My wife and our 3 children had to immigrate from our country because of the many pressures placed upon them. My family and I endured all those harsh struggles simply because I spoke my mind. We went through these hardships for the sake of every letter written in this book.
On November 29, 2012, the criminal court in Doha convicted Mohammed al-Ajami for inciting the overthrow of the ruling regime and criticizing the emir for 2 of his poems, and sentenced him to life in prison in a 2-line judgment. The poet was not present for the decision. His sentence was later reduced to 15 years on appeal on February 25, 2013. That sentence was confirmed by Qatar's Supreme Court on October 21, 2013, despite arguments that the charges and trial were deeply flawed. He has no further legal recourse in the courts. El-Ajami has been held in solitary confinement in Doha's central prison since his arrest, with extremely limited visitation rights in violation of United Nations principles. On October 23, 2013, representatives from Pan American Center were prevented from visiting him despite having been told their visit had been approved. This is Muhammad al-Ajami's poem from a prison cell. Poem from a prison cell. Is it my mind or my heart that I've lost to you, Arab lands, home of enemies? If you held our minds with law and reason, if you respected our opinions, then you'd hold my heart as well. Who am I? Don't ask the days about me. I'm nothing but a prisoner in an isolation cell. Here in my country, oppression is what takes our rights away. Here, ignorance determines our convictions. Here, the people no longer have a voice, cannot spell out the language of reproach. My country, if insight required an apology, I'd never stop apologizing. Tell your children, east and west, and keep telling them until the birds sing it in the branches, that a people without opinions is nothing but a herd that's thirsty yet blind to the nearby oasis. Fight for your convictions. This is how you ride your steeds and bear your arms against a ruler who seeks to oppress and who molds your silence into a pretext for injustice. Tell them that I, stubborn, persistent, was unmatched in my victory and my defeat. Time may have disgraced me, but I haven't been easy for time to shackle. Lord of rabble, what of yours compares to the thrones of Imad Ad's people in Aram, the city of pillars, which God spoke of in his revelation? You've been insincere, a false prophet on earth, though you, like Jesus, spoke in the crib. You wounded truth, and my proud allegiance is lifeless now and clad in black. How can you expect obedience when you call for injustice? If we obeyed you, then what would become of our principles? When we pray, who do we pray to? To God or to God's servants? There's no room for virtue under oppression. There's no room for vice on the road of justice. Whoever wrongs and deceives his people will never be able to guide them. If history were objective, it would tell how you've sought glory in my so-called enmity. Go ahead and be miserable, though you and I are not enemies. I avoid enmity and make enemies only of those who are truly worthy. If you ask after my finest day, on an occasion when words of pride are called for, I'd call history to mind and say it was when I was a prisoner in my own country, from when you shackled my wrists. History gave me strength and confidence in victory. These disgraceful chains are power in my hands, not power for those who lord it over me. Doors and guards wake me up gently whenever I sleep too long. Is it not desire but fear that makes me ask this? Fear that the enemies will see my weakness when I sleep? Though I no longer know if my eyes are closed or if I've been awake all this time.
My name is Danniel Schoonebeek. I'm going to be reading 4 poems by the radical Iranian poet Mehdi Mousavi, translated very beautifully, I think, by Amir Kadem. Mousavi was sentenced to 9 years in prison and 99 lashings for what was deemed propaganda against the state, which is something I personally think is very important. And I'm going to epigraph each of the 4 untitled poems with a fragment written by the poet C.D. Wright, who died just 2 days ago, and who was a sort of lifelong advocate for literary freedom of expression herself. And I'm going to sort of introduce the reason why I'm doing that via a quick thing that the poet Peter Richards wrote about C.D. earlier today. If you were someone milking goats in the winter, C.D. Wright would send you long johns, not 1 pair, but 2. If you were someone whose writing was being suppressed, censored, neglected, or disparaged by whichever power that be, C.D. Wright would not only reach out to you in a letter, but also work to change the different infrastructures so your voice could be heard, both here in the United States and throughout the world. The weirdening never lets up, she said. Ergo, poets shouldn't either. 1. Will you allow me to call your name, to slough off the previous passions of a man? Allow me, will you, to love, to lift my soul and fold it inside your sweaty palms? To be a child again, crying with no excuse again, to throw stones at a flock of birds? To become a poet again in my room's sad corner, or no, to give you a call over the phone, sitting there with your wedding gown all wet, still waiting for me to make that call. For you, in the first chapters of your life, how shall I speak of the end of this tale? You have returned again for me to love you, and I, my dear, have no right to chicken out. The world is not ineluctably finished, she said, though the watchfires have been doused. 2. By the window, a man watched his life fade away. Pride was showing me his dominion. Eclipse was it? No. The midday sun, desolate, was sending her condolences to the sky. I would have pitied myself a bit, only if the absurdity of your world gave me a chance. Time has always crushed me under his boots, always has forfeited my turn to others. And the boy picked up the blade, slit his wrist, and the father was still feeding the imaginary child. Then came the earthquake. My eyes opened to see someone shaking me amidst the sleep. The piano stands there in the dark, she said, like a boy with an orchid. Someone putting their tongue where their tooth had been. 3. To defy shattering, I petrified like a rock. Now the cranes lift me away. To a God that we are not being, all the reasons are proving what is not. Deploring a wasted bygone, we wait for a future modeled after the fossils. My honor trashes me, my friends, and my land too. Even they trash me now, my own lines of verse. A forsaken file in an archive am I. Come read me out of this layered text. It was not rain if my face looks wet. Not a burden of ordained, but a dagger is in my back. Stop asking for names, this futile wordplay. Cain too, my friend, bore the name of brother. From infancy onwards, pain by your side. Your one and only friend, pain by your side. You turned into a poet for a herd of dogs. You turned into a poet for a herd of dogs. You turned into a poet for a herd of dogs. Turned into a poet, but poetry was just pain. Poetry will not go quietly, she said. You would have to starve it out. And poetry can live on very little. And hunger and love move the world. 4. Flew away my muse from the face of this verse. The girl grew wings and flew from my house. Sparrows flew, your birds flew, and crows flew all the frozen fingers when my name was called. The sparrows flew away, and the monster of sorrows invaded the nest of my dreams like a vulture. This melody is the malady of missing you that popped out from my pack of Valium. Since the mailman, the white dove, was long dead, words turned into wings, and my messages flew away. Thank you.
Every bit of liquid that I drank since I left home at 2:30 this afternoon has gathered in an inopportune way. And as I sat there listening to everybody, I was so moved that I feel like all the blood has rushed to my heart. And so if anybody wants ice for their drinks, I have 10 cubes here in my hands. Listening to, obviously, it's an honor to be here, and like Red said, it is also sad that we have to gather in this way. Listening to what he said, I thought about revolution in places that have terrible things happening, like Saudi Arabia and in Palestine. It made me think about this country and how it is a country which has the largest number of incarcerated children in the world, and where we have a 12-year-old boy who can't play with his toy gun in a park in Ohio, but we have 40-year-old white men occupying public lands and being allowed to receive snacks that they forgot to bring. And I bring that up because a lot of the things that we become comfortable with in this country are what we allow to make it okay for us to permit similar things to happen in other countries, including in Palestine, where a great many children are in jail, and where a young girl who is walking through a checkpoint with a box of crayons is shot and killed, but settlers walk around with machine guns. And a lot of the writers in the anthology that I put together talk about these connections. They make that leap, which is actually, could be considered complex, but is actually not that complex. And if we took the trouble to think about it a little, 4 of the writers from that anthology spoke here today, including Dina and Lawrence and Duranya. And I think about how many of those writers struggled with how to articulate what they felt. Many of them felt they didn't have the information, or they didn't have the right words, they didn't feel competent, or felt they did not have the authority to speak. But they found a way through that, as we are doing here. I was listening to the way we forget our words, our voices falter, but when you think about the fact that we are gathered because of life and death situation for someone, in this case Ashraf, or in the case of these writers in the anthology for Palestine, our awkwardness and our tremulousness is insignificant, because what is really important is the sound of our voices. David Bowie died last week, and both Rob Spillman and I talked about how his music affected us, and I'm sure nobody forgets him singing over a wall that we thought was going to stand forever in Berlin. Similarly, the Palestine Festival of Literature brings poets and writers, several of whom also appear in the book, to Palestine so they can speak about the things of life, and their voices reverberate over walls that seem similarly like they will stand forever, and we hope will not. And those voices reach people, Palestinians inside Palestine, as well as those in exile all over the world, including someone like Ashraf. The poem that I chose two poems that I'm reading from today are from Fadwa Tukan, who's a early Palestinian poet who lived through the Nakba and whose work influenced the young Mahmoud Darwish. And the interesting connection here is that her work is published in the United States by Grey Wolf Press, which also publishes me. And it has been translated from the Arabic by Naomi Shihab Nye, whose work also appears in Extraordinary Rendition, American Writers on Palestine. The first of these is called Enough for Me. Enough for me to die on her earth, be buried in her, to melt and vanish into her soil, then sprout forth as a flower, played with by a child from my country. Enough for me to remain in my country's embrace, to be in her, close as a handful of dust, a sprig of grass, a flower. This second poem was written, it's called To the Imprisoned Singer, and it was written for Kamal Nasir, who was a famous Palestinian journalist and poet and writer who was exiled from Palestine and was killed in Beirut in 1973 in an attack that is said to have been perpetrated with the participation of Ehud Barak, who was dressed up as a woman at the time, as a soldier for the Israeli occupation forces then. To the Imprisoned Singer, to Kamal Nasir. Your singing soars to us despite the narrowness of the sky. Imprisoned bird, sing forth from behind the walls of suffering and night. The iron bars that shape the sky before your face will not keep your singing from our ears. Sing, bird, sing. The road of hope still stretches, brilliantly lit, despite the darkness around us. Your singing, bird, returned me to the past, when your feet and wings were free, when the jasmine bower embraced us and you sang the poetry of hope and pride and strength. Even the stars leaned low to hear your song. And we felt as green and fresh as our pastures, as our mountain slopes filled with roaring wind and pride of our mountains' peaks. Sing, bird, sing. Despite the chains and darkness, the horizon still offers its rich line of hope, awaiting the sun from behind the smoke. Glory to sunlight, never despair, and freedom will find victory. Tomorrow, in the homeland of our dreams, never say our dreams are lost. I like that poem because it speaks to the fact that we are writers gifted with imagination. We are not required to take the world as it is presented to us and imagine that that's how it has to be. We are allowed to dream and hope that it will become a different place. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Thank you to all the readers for those wonderful, powerful words. I just want to echo what Ruth said a little bit. I grew up in Berlin, and I also just came back from 2 weeks in Palestine. And it is so incredibly important that all of you raise your voices for those that cannot raise voices. I am also the chair of the PEN membership committee. So if you are not a member, or if you have any questions about how you can help, how you can be involved, please do so. And please stick around, see the Agitprop, amazing Agitprop show here. And thanks once more to all of our wonderful readers.
There's also a bar right over there. Thank you so much.
Okay.